it's a very, very full panel. We haven't got much time. I want to kind of crack right in. So it'd be great to have a brief introduction from all of you. What's your name, where'd you come from? And also a bit about your actual backgrounds as well, because there's an interesting mix of backgrounds here too. So I think that would add some colour to the discussion. Anthony, should we start with you?
Yes, hello. I'm Anthony Rhind. I'm from a company called Beamly, which is a digital marketing firm owned by Coty. So we're focused very much on their needs. We work with a few other people, but not a huge amount. The vision there is data through designed experiences reflect that data, optimizing it through to commercial outcomes, sales, or thereafter. So it's a kind of a four-pillar model around that, fairly logical. My background is agencies and a little bit of ad tech, although I've been not so close to this space for the last year, so I might bring a different perspective than I might have done in the past, I hope.
Hello, I'm Blodwell from the Programmatic Advisory. Similar to Anthony, spent lots of my time previously at agencies, WPP, IPG, Dentsu. Now we run consultancy for primarily advertisers, but some tech companies and publishers as well. And quite interesting in the past year to 2 years, the shift of the role of an agency, the role of consultancy, which I'm looking forward to chatting about.
Hi, I'm Fiona Davis from Infinitive. We're a boutique digital media consulting firm. We work both on the buy side and the sell side, so with both publishers and with advertisers. And I have a publisher background myself, came from CBS originally, worked on ad tech, marketing tech.
I'm Amir Malik. I work for Accenture, and I have a background in Programmatic 4 or 5 years ago. That's where I started kind of my career and my interest, and worked for a few publishers, a few tech companies, and now work for Accenture.
I'm Jill Orr. I work for Triad Retail Media. We work with retailers to help them realise the potential of advertising or digital as it relates to both shopper marketing budgets and also brand budgets. Background is in premium publishing, but have been working in the retail space for the last 3 years.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, guys. So let's get right to it. Is the traditional media agency model dead?
I go?
May as well.
May as well. Okay, very big question. I suppose model. What do we mean by model? Do we mean the commercial model? Do we mean the service model? Do we mean the training model? I think all of these things need to be questioned. So classically, agencies have been paid either for creative work or for media work. Often the media work has been commission-based. We're in a world where technology expertise and data expertise is required, doesn't necessarily relate in proportion to the media budget or indeed the creative budget. And often you do a lot of work before you spend anything. Strategy often hasn't been paid for in the past. It's a cost of goods sold on buying or even creative development fees. So I think the commercial model of the agency, whichever part of it, needs to be reconsidered to reflect the time spent and the expertise of the people spending the time on a particular project. So I think economically, yes. Skill set, again, I think advertising has been very intuition-based, lots of experience, meaning you know what's right, and you use data often to validate or refine it. And I think we need to be a lot more empirical and a lot more scientific and listen to the data in a way that hasn't always been the agency core identity. And I think the most critical thing on that is to, before you say, I'm going to listen to the data, you've got to decide what you're asking the data. And I think, again, the rigor of knowing what you're trying to define is critical in a way that maybe a lot of discovery work is done that takes you to a place. I think we need to be a lot more rigorous, given the amount of people's time going into data analysis now. And training, that means that we've got to not quash creativity or create a sense that creative and data, in creative, all its definitions, are separate. They need to be seen as enabling one another.
Thank you.
I think it's quite hard to say what an agency actually is these days. So previously you would go, oh, they're a service layer. Then you would go, well, now they do media buying. Now they own tech. They even own data. So it's quite hard to sort of say what's traditional, what's new about an agency, and they're all kind of trying to move and adapt with the times in their own way. I think the reason why you're seeing so much, the evolution of it is clients, not just through transparency, but may want to own some of the capability. So The way that you can look at a holding group now is you go, well, it's fairly modular. Before you go, okay, I'm going to Maxus for this, or I'm going to iProspect for that. Now you can go, well, I don't want this, all of this with Maxus, I want bits and pieces. So I think the way that particularly global brands who operate locally organise themselves and organise their agencies has changed significantly. And I think because of that, the agencies have had to evolve, and therefore the model evolves with that.
Jill, Triad were bought out by Xaxis back in the last year, so Triad is now a WPP-owned company. Was that a clear statement of intent from them buying something that is an e-commerce specialist? Like, it sounds like it to me, or is it fairly common for that kind of skill set to be existing in the agency holding groups?
Well, within the agency holding groups, and I include all of them, not just WPP, there has been a trend in the last couple of years towards having e-commerce groups within the buying side, so that they are focusing their time on understanding shopper marketing, which is the last interrupted, if you want, budget. There's very few agencies who are across shopper marketing budgets, because the shopper marketing budget in itself is so tied to the retail brand relationship. That said, I think if you look beyond just the media buying side of agencies, I've been surprised and impressed by the amount of retail experience there is in other parts of the agencies. And, I think as brands, not just retailers, but as brands are starting to evolve, and there's a business transformation that's enabled by digital and all of the insights on customers and data that they're starting to achieve, the demands they're asking of agencies in terms of pulling together how to interpret and take advantage of that is changing the ask, is changing the skill level that's expected from the agency groups. And therefore, as a result of that, I think that the business model has to change and has to evolve to adapt to the increased ask. It's not just about buying media anymore, it's about providing better insight and better strategy further up the funnel ahead of the advertising.
Do you think this need to deliver strategy has kind of almost stopped the rate at the bottom that existed for so many years in agencies, that offering 1% of media, and then someone comes in, offers 0.5% of media, finds out they can't deliver it, but by that point it's too late? Do you think that this need and this kind of desire from advertisers for them to evolve is actually causing improvement in the service layer from agency perspective? Fiona, what's your take on that?
It's a slow burn, is what I would say.
Right.
So I agree with everything you said, Anthony, about there's definitely been a case of the agencies are being asked to do more and more by their advertisers, but they'll still expect them to nail them to the floor on rates, and it still expects strategy consultants and DMP specialists and programmatic specialists at the same price, and it's just not physically possible. And so I think the conversation is changing, where smaller companies like us get asked to come in and actually fill the gap between where the agency is prepared to go to without charging more money, and the client really not quite wrapping their head around, that's an expensive service. You're not going to get that for what you're paying the agency today, so you need to rethink how you're interacting with both the agency, how you're pricing stuff, and what skill sets you need, and you may not get it all from one place.
I think the technology that powers programmatic has fundamentally changed the media buying landscape. So you've got a situation now where it's a lot easier to request reports, to see statistics, metrics, and I feel that traditional media buying agencies are there to be disrupted if they cannot shift the operating model that they currently exist in. And I think it is possible to make that shift. The question is how quick it can be done, and who's going to lead that for them. So if you look at any of the traditional global brands that we work with, we have so much inbound traffic and interest around this space. It's really kind of an unstoppable force, and it appears to be making a lot of people nervous. So we're responding to that demand, right, by hiring people that understand this space. And I think, if you are being asked difficult questions right now, if you're getting, a response that doesn't satisfy you, then you're going to look elsewhere to ask those questions to get the response that satisfies you. And that's where we come in. And on the ground, we see lots of boutique consultancies now operating in front of Accenture's clients, specialized consultancies. There's a real opportunity out there if you want to start that. But if you look at traditional media agencies, I think, that they need to start disruption within. or they're just going to wait for it to be disrupted from an external force. And this doesn't necessarily boil down to how they charge. It's about the level of quality that they provide. Procter & Gamble withdrawing hundreds of millions of dollars of spend and then saying it didn't impact our sales doesn't really tell me that display banners don't work. It tells me that maybe they haven't been running the most effective strategies, because there are companies that run display banners and get results for their customers.
Or they can't measure properly.
Oh.
That's a whole different topic that we won't go into now. So Amir, Fiona, Wayne, I mean, so you operate on a consultative basis from very, very different routes to entry. If an agency hears that you guys are coming in to work with an advertiser, they must go running. Like, it must be quite, you talked about nerves earlier, Amir. Like, there must be a lot how do they, what's your approach when you're going into these people? You're trying to say to the advertisers, get rid of the agency, they're useless? Like, how are you tackling this?
They're not here, are they, today?
Speak freely.
I think it would be fair if we had some proper media buying agency representation on the panel. But I feel
we did, but unfortunately someone dropped out. But yes,
there you go. But I think no, definitely. The reality is that knowledge sells right now. Okay, if you need to know the answer to a question, you need to ask those that know.
Do agencies not know?
Well, I don't know. It appears that there's a gap here for us to exploit, right? So, I think that
Anthony's shaking his head. He's not happy.
I'm happy to hear what you have to say. But agencies work with loads of third parties themselves, right? Who provide point solutions in many spaces. So, I think it might not be that the agencies don't know, but there's an education piece that's an opportunity again for the agencies to take, right? To educate their clients. Their clients, they're becoming more interested in technology. The CMO's portfolio is changing. It's not just I've got a media buying agency, creative agency, TV, print. They're thinking about the DMP. Like, what's this DMP mean for my business?
I'm not here just to defend the agency, but I would say that there's, that's only 50% of the story. It's, also, you've got to look to the client and what the client is asking the agency to do. And, there's been a significant shift in both the competitive landscape, the customer requirements, and the technology that's available to all the clients. And there's been a slow burn in terms of their education. And now they know what they want. It's about business outcomes. So people talk about digital transformation. It's really about business transformation that's enabled by a lot of what digital has brought. And, so today the conversations are probably better, smarter, that in terms of what they're looking for from an agency or a consultancy. And I challenge slightly that agencies don't have the intelligence or the staff. All of these conversations about transparency and viewability, whilst all of those conversations were happening, they were also hiring engineers and data specialists, etc., to backfill their capability. So, yes, there are very many examples where agencies have missed the boat, but there's also probably an equal number of examples where they are super servicing their clients in ways that they never did before.
I would agree with that.
No margins.
No, I would agree with that. But interestingly, to your point, Lindsay, people don't mind paying really good money and potentially over the odds if their agency's doing a really good job for them. So we have a whole range of clients. And I frankly have the opinion, sounds very cynical, but you get the agency you deserve. If you have not educated yourself and you're so crap internally that you don't know the right questions to ask, then frankly they're going to take you to the cleaners and you had it coming. Like, it's not all on the agency to get that together. It's incumbent in your job to skill yourself up, and if you don't have the skills, go hire some people that do, so you can ask them the right questions, and then you're not nailing them to the floor on the wrong things. You're asking them the right questions and getting the right results from them. Because the best relationships we see between agencies and advertisers are the advertisers that have got it together and have hired people that know what they're talking about, have a really good relationship with their agency because they know how to manage the relationship well. And as a result, the agency puts their best people on the account, and so they've got really good back and forth. We just did a programmatic assessment with a client where even though the contract wasn't in place to nail down all of the transparency, in practice they were doing it because the client was asking the right questions, and they had a great relationship, they were doing a great job, and they had good outcomes. So it very much depends on, it's as much on the advertiser as it is on the agency to drive that relationship.
Yeah, and we find that, so we're engaged with clients who use agencies quite regularly, and we find that we're additive. So one of my frustrations...
You aren't trying to eat their lunch. You aren't
No,
trying to
no,
leave
no.
the agency and take all their clients from them.
Not always. but
Noted.
But when I was agency side, you would produce really good work and it may not get the recognition it deserved because the client wasn't sure what they were looking at. It's like if I went to an art museum and saw Picasso, I would know that's very good compared to something else. I wouldn't have a trained eye. So we get used a lot to not just like not necessarily get the best out of the agency, but
Like
get
sense checking.
sense checking, but also putting what the good stuff agencies do in front of clients. And don't get me wrong, there's tons of terrible stuff, but where there is really good work and really good practices, that should get recognised and rewarded. So I think we hopefully do a good job in representing both sides.
So, yes, you're working on behalf of the agency to a certain degree. Obviously, your clients are the advertisers, but you are trying to create a cohesive environment where everyone just gets along.
Well, sort of.
No, okay. I tried.
I think we're trying to work.
Sometimes.
We're trying to get to a place where Programmatic does well, whether it's from an agency, from a client,
Yeah.
from a third party, who knows. But I think sometimes you need a little patience on the advertiser side.
Yeah, I mean, I think the agencies do amazing work, and sometimes they do pretty dreadful work. I don't think you can categorise any of the agencies as better or worse than the other. It depends upon the people that have been put on the business, and if they've been given the time, either by the client or by the remuneration model, enough resources to deliver what should be delivered. And sometimes there's stupidity in the agency that means that you're not going to get to a good outcome because somebody in the chain doesn't know what they're doing. Sometimes that person exists on the brand side. It's the nature. But I think all of the agencies add value some of the time. I'd hope more of the time. But I think what's critical is if the client, the brand's got agencies doing stuff, and they say to that team, I'd like you to do this project now. Sometimes the team won't have the bandwidth to take that on. So someone's going to say, rather than disrupting day to day from my agency, whatever the definition of the agency function is, I'm going to bring someone else to help deliver a project against that. It may then go back into the agency. It may not be in the scopes. They might need to define how they get paid for it. Sometimes it's in the interest of that agency to let an intermediary come in and go, let's scope the landscape, let's look independent. Maybe that's finally what's making the brand listen to something the agency's been saying they should do for a long time, like Programmatic. You should do Programmatic. I think you're ripping me off, so I'm not going to do it. Someone else has to come in and say, this is the way it works, this is what a DMP is. Don't just buy a DMP because you think you need to have one, understand what the use case is. I mean, you can't have the same people delivering every project because the teams don't have bandwidth. So again, I think it's critical also if you're one of the intermediaries, whether or not you're the primary agency or whether or not you're a consultant coming in, you've got to work with each other because all you're then doing is making it harder for the brand to understand what success looks like because they don't know whether or not they're being told it's crap because someone's fighting or because it is crap. So I think, again, we've got to get away from this apocalyptic context. The only apocalypse in the agency world is that it's been used to dreadful commercial models for so long. That's got to be broken, or else there won't be enough time to service these complicated things that agencies now need to deliver for brands.
There's a lot of talk, there's been a lot of talk for many years about in-housing, and if in-housing is a real threat to agencies. And obviously you've got, Anthony, Beamley is almost kind of the best of both worlds, like a hybrid model. You're an agency that's practically owned by a company.
100% owned.
So is that, from your perspective, obviously having worked for the big holding companies as well, is that, do you think, a viable alternative to everyone trying to bring their programmatic teams in-house?
So Programmatic is only one bit of what we do. And so, again, I think the beauty of an in-house type solution is that if you've got a problem in the digital area that you want to invest money behind, then an in-house solution is a good way of doing it because you can be 100% sure about the decisions and the rationale behind the decisions and success or failure and what's behind it. Because I think it's harder if you're working with a company that can be terminated. If something fails, they've got to explain, and it may be that means that the learning is less agile. So, I think in-housing is an option in some circumstances, but it's very hard for an in-house to do everything. Because again, it still has to operate a P&L, which suggests that if you're going to bring resources in, you've got to justify them. And in some ways, the negative assessment of an in-house can be a lot more pronounced because, again, there's no ability to obfuscate. So I think in-housing will work for many people that have a deep-seated, complicated requirement. It could be acceleration of change, could be owning a part of the value chain. SEM for a while, programmatic now, creative is another area, building websites. I think everybody will make their own decision, but it can't all be in-housed.
Wayne and Fiona, I mean, obviously talking about in-housing, you've talked about, working with agencies where there is value to do so, but there's also a flip side of it where you might well be recommending to in-house something, if not some part, if not all of the activity that you're working with. You must have to remain completely impartial when talking about kind of who you're working with. How do you approach the impartial? You have to be neutral in this environment, right?
Yeah, I think you just have to work out, is that advertiser set up to be able to in-house in the first place? So you have to go through some sort of due diligence to say, did it have existing talent, yes or no? If not, how long did it take to get that in there? Do they have enough data to make really impact their marketing, yes or no? Are they measuring effectively? Because as Anthony was saying, if you're in-housing, you become accountable. You can't just pick up the phone and shout at your least favourite client leadership person. And then I guess the fourth thing is the tech. Can you really evaluate what sets one DMP apart from another? Can you really structure a contract in the right way? So there's these moving parts, and you have to understand. Firstly, are you in a position? And sometimes, the ambition is so great. You can look at those modules, you can start to timeline it out and start to say, okay, so your talent currently, a bit of a challenge in programmatic or in paid social, whatever it might be. Okay, it takes 3 months to hire, 6 months, etc., and timeline it out. So I think one of the things we look at is vision and execution. So quite often the ambition and vision is fantastic, but in reality the execution of that's fairly poor. So I think you have to start with a fairly neutral look at your own capabilities, and quite often if you're doing that internally, you can't remove yourself away from the emotion. So when we go in and do information gathering, you've got office politics, you've got this person doesn't like this person in finance, whatever it might be, and that gets in the way of clarity and clear decision making. So yeah, as I said, I think you just have to try to look at it from a neutral, clear-minded perspective around what you want to do.
To add on to that as well, I think there's most advertisers, especially global advertisers, their budgets aren't set up in a way where you can easily in-house stuff either, because they're siloed into either brands or into locations. So 2 markets might be all up for bringing it in-house, and 5 others are not interested at all. They can't get headcount signed off internally, but they can get a bunch of money to use an outsourced provider. So it very much depends on the financials of the company as well, and how they're set up internally, because that probably causes the most drama. Even if you do get them all to agree to sign off their budgets and put them into a central bucket to do some kind of global deal, getting it rolled out then is a complete nightmare.
Yeah.
And getting them all to agree to the right strategy and the right approach and who's going to go first and all that kind of stuff, it's easier said than done. And I think there's shades of grey, right, between there's bringing programmatic in-house, which for most people just means they signed a contract with the DSP and their agency is still running it for them. For a lot of our clients, it's more about data control. So they want to bring the DMP in-house because they're trying to onboard first-party data, run their own ID graph, and they don't want the agency to have full access to all of that data. But there's no interest at all in them running a trading desk. So it depends on the client.
And then, Amir, Accenture work slightly differently. I mean, you mentioned earlier that you've got clients that work with Accenture that also work with specialist boutique agencies, much like Infinitive and Programmatic Advisory. So what's your end game? What's Accenture's end game? Are you trying to be a partner, a kind of neutral partner to the advertisers?
Accenture acquired creative agency,
Conrama.
And so we've got an agency dimension to what we do. But I think the reality is that we classify ourselves as kind of end-to-end solution architects. So we try to...
What does that mean?
Evaluate the client's landscape, see where their capabilities lie, where the opportunity lies, and help them on that discovery journey. And we're finding that, if you step back and look at trading desk, I mean, it's not the biggest portion of advertising spend, right? But as TV ad budgets move digital and DSPs can deliver ads, there is definitely a path that's opening up there, which we need to explore. Especially, we're looking at closely. We work with broadcasters, telcos, media owners, even Google and Facebook. They're our clients. So I think you've got to be a bit optimistic and ambitious in this space. Agency trading desks, I think they're good because they were essentially a form of in-housing, right? So agencies would rely on third-party performance networks historically, almost exclusively. And then the birth of Xaxis, or the acquisition of Xaxis within WPP, fueled a massive capability within the agency, which I think was ultimately positive. Okay? But what you can see is that, especially in the case of some of these big global clients, that they have so much data that if they were to have the attitude of an Amazon, and we're looking at what Amazon do, for instance, who are building internal capabilities in marketing and now offering that as a service to agencies and a service to clients and brands, I think that's very interesting. I think that you should definitely be, I mean, if you work in digital advertising but you're not interested in that and you just want to see a sheet where the impressions went and kind of reverse engineer advertising, say clicks, viewability, yeah, I'm doing my job for my client. That's not really very passionate. I think there should be more to it. You should be curious about how can I activate the DMP.
So are you guys looking at the agencies and looking at how it's done at the moment, the mistakes that people have made, and trying to move away from almost the consultancy that you're classed as to kind of being an agency that services across everything?
But the problems that we outlined here, there's this difficult structurally, organizational structure gets in the way, commercial setup and financial kind of operating models are not sustainable, exactly the sorts of things that we want to avoid. Okay?
You're trying to get rid of the ad nets as well?
No. So
you mentioned obviously money going through trading desks into the kind of third-party networks. Is that
no? I would argue the other way. I think I'm surprised that an agency hasn't bought a Quantcast or a Media IQ or a Captify, for instance, because those guys are very good at what they do, right? And they're doing it on behalf of clients through the agencies. You look at Criteo. Okay, Criteo get criticised a lot in many circles, but they worked historically with the agencies. $100 million went out of GroupM into Criteo about 3.5 years ago. Now very little goes out, but Criteo are a multi-billion-dollar company working directly with advertisers. So they kind of just said, we don't really care about this tradition. We're just going to go straight for clients and say, this is what we can do for you. So I think there's disruption everywhere, and it's so ripe for disruption. We can't ignore it. You can't just sit back and say, these are all the issues that we've always had. They're not, right? It's different, right? You've got capabilities that you can explore, technology that you can bring in, and with the right skill set. I mean, if you go to a client and you see that the people there are not very good, well, that's a people and process consultancy job. Okay, you've got to add that string to your bow where you're recommending what sort of people they need to bring in and how they need to change their workforce in order to build that in-house capability.
And how does this work from talking, Fiona, as you did about global clients? And obviously Accenture, we talked about your impartiality, whereas Accenture has a lot of strategic partnerships, also been a lot of acquiring going on. How can you maintain impartiality if you've got strategic partnerships? So do you have certain partnerships in certain markets where you'd recommend a certain agency over somebody else, or kind of how does that work for you guys?
Was that to me or for
you?
I'll take it.
Anyone can answer it. We don't mind anymore.
We're completely impartial, so we don't have any tech partnerships with anybody, any kind of we work with pretty much everybody in the ad tech space and marketing tech space. You have to in this world, and that's our shtick. We don't do deals with people. We literally just recommend whoever's best for the client based on the requirements that they have.
Yeah, we're exactly the same. I mean, if you think about something like Salesforce, who we sell through a number of paths, Accenture being one, Deloitte being another. If you are coming to review your CRM, does that via one of those consultancies? Does that does that provide conflict? Yes. But does it provide strategic benefits that may actually benefit the client, either through commercial, support, product, whatever it might be? Probably yes as well. So I think ultimately the client has to make a decision on, do they think that decision making it provides a conflict or not? And hopefully when you are consulting, you have to try and be as transparent and pure play as you can.
And I suppose the key question of all of this is, The consultation is only as useful as the execution that follows it. The downside of too many consultants is who's going to do the work.
Agencies.
Proof's in the pudding.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, are they?
Well, that's the question that everyone's asking, right?
How do you get it off the PowerPoint?
Oh, who's up for the job, right? Have they been doing the job which justifies the amount of money that they've been taking? I think that's the question. Yeah,
Which is an interesting one from the consultancies.
That's very interesting. That's a bold statement, Amir.
Yeah, I mean, look,
We've checked the margins.
make no mistake, right? Deloitte's, PwC's, these are premium management consultancies, right? They cost a lot of money, but the deliverables need to be measured and they need to be, ascertained and visible to the client.
So you're saying that the Accentures, Deloitte, PwC's of the world, the output is much more quantifiable, justifiable than what potentially an agency is putting forward.
You don't hear many stories about, if we didn't deliver, then we wouldn't have much business left. So I think the reality is that you're seeing numbers decline across the global agency groups. There could be a plethora of reasons, economics, etc. But I think that ultimately programmatic has disrupted the traditional media buying model, right? I'm not just talking about display banners. And there needs to be an adaptation there. People like Wayne, etc., need to be at the forefront of this change and leading that mentality shift in these agencies. And if they can't, come to terms with that, and it's not just the agencies. A business is just a collection of people at the end of the day, right? It could be called Accenture here or whatever. But you have to have the right approach, all right? You have to have the right talent, I think, and the skill set. And people need to think about engaging those that do know as opposed to those that don't know or can't give them the answers to their questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Unfortunately, I could sit here chatting to you guys about this for hours, but we are out of time. So I have to say thank you so much to my wonderful panellists, Anthony, Wayne, Fiona, Amir, and Jill. Round of applause, guys.
Thank you.